Today we have some updated NHL trade rumors on Minnesota Wild defenseman Matt Dumba. We also have a lot to talk about when it comes to the Arizona Coyotes and the many trades they could be considering. We also have an update on free agent defenseman Alex Pietrangelo, as well as several coaching updates and an update on the 2021 World Junior Championships. We'll jump into all the latest news coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. We have a lot to cover today, a variety of news and rumors, so let's dive right in and get started. First up, I want to talk about the 2021 World Junior Championships. Now, originally this year's tournament was scheduled to be held in Edmonton, with Red Deer also getting some games as well, so it was going to be in Alberta. Obviously, they're not going to be able to have a normal tournament with fans in attendance, so they did announce and confirm today, there's been some speculation on this over the last week or so, that they will indeed be using the Edmonton bubble or the Edmonton hub, the way it's been set up for the NHL. They're going to be conducting that tournament in the exact same type of format, so the World Junior Championship players will all arrive in Edmonton, go into their bubble, and compete for the tournament in that regard. So obviously the bubble system in the NHL has been very successful. We've seen the same in the NBA. Even though I don't see it happening for next season, I don't think the NHL can go in a bubble for that long of a period of time. We're going to have to see a different approach, different format. And there's been all kinds of different ideas and concepts that are being discussed in case they can have fans in attendance, which we know is very unlikely. Now, of course, with that in mind, the Edmonton Red Deer plan for the tournament will continue next year. So they're hoping that the 2022 tournament can be held normally with full fans in attendance. So they are going to be giving another opportunity the following year to host a tournament with normal guidelines in place like they would have already. And then, of course, that year was supposed to have been Sweden's turn in Gothenburg. That's going to get bumped to 2024. So obviously they've made those all announcements. They're all official now. So of course, with the Edmonton bubble being used for the World Juniors, which starts late December, kind of goes along with the fact that they must already kind of know that the NHL season is definitely not going to start until January when that would be done. You gotta wonder, would that impact Oilers training camp or whatnot, or how could I kind of go about having it? Because obviously right now we're hearing that it could be training camp in early January with a mid-January start for the NHL. Could even be a few more weeks beyond that. I'm not sure. It's kind of up in the air, but it looks as though the World Junior Tournament will be held in Edmonton, and the NHL likely won't be starting at all, possibly even training camps, until after it's done. Now, in today's video, we have a lot to talk about when it comes to coaches and GMs and confirming some people being hired here. First up, we're going to talk about is the Maple Leafs hiring assistant coach Manny Malhotra, who was previously just with the Vancouver Canucks. The Canucks were let him go to take this job with the Leafs. It is considered a bit of a promotion. He's going to be replacing former assistant coach Paul McFarland, who, of course, left the team for another opportunity. Malhotra was, for the most part, what they call like the eye-in-the-sky coach in Vancouver, so he'll get more of an opportunity with an expanded role on the Toronto Maple Leaf staff. So, of course, that should pretty well end the speculation of Bruce Boudreau going to Toronto. We did confirm that Boudreau has had some discussions with the Leafs about being an assistant to Sheldon Keefe, but I would assume the main reason why they didn't go in that direction would be that it's clear that Boudreau still wants to be an NHL head coach, and if they did hire him, and let's say that there's some early season openings come up, he's going to want to apply for those, and they may not end up having him for very long, which could disrupt their staff and cause them to hire somebody else, and it's probably for the best until Boudreau, or unless he was willing to say, I'm going to stay as an assistant coach, I'm not going to be pursuing other opportunities. But that's how the Leafs coaching staff will be rounded out for next season. Now, jumping into the Matt Dumba trade rumors. Of course, we saw a flurry of activity when it comes to the rumor mill just churning away after we saw the Jonas Brodin contract come in for the Wild here in a 7-year deal at $6 million. So now you got Brodin, you got Ryan Suter, and Jared Spurgeon all on extended long-term contracts with no move clauses. So that kind of creates a spot that when it comes to the Seattle expansion draft, that the Wild will be forced to protect 4 defensemen if they want to protect Dumba as well, because they're going to have to be forced to protect the other 3 because of the contract. So that kind of shows that they basically, with those clauses, are saying that Dumba's the odd man out unless they protect 4D, and the only way they can do that is by going the 8 skater route instead of 7 forwards, 3 defensemen, and a goalie. So it kind of depends on how they want to go about things. Now, it wouldn't be completely ruling out the fact that they could do that, because as of today at least, the Wild may not have 7 forwards they would prefer to protect rather than taking the chance of losing Dumba. But more likely what we're going to see here, and based on comments from GM Bill Guerin and several NHL writers and insiders, it's likely that Dumba is going to be traded, just a matter of when and where. Now, they don't have to rush this, of course. They need to wait for the right deal. Dumba could play with them this season and either be moved at the deadline if they're not going to be in the playoffs, or they could even look to do it around next season's offseason before the expansion draft actually takes place. And up until that time that the draft is there and they had to submit their list of protected players, they can have to do it anytime right up until there. Now, it's well known that Bill Guerin wants a top 6 center iceman in return for Dumba. That's the asking price. There could be other pieces involved too, but the primary piece would be a top 6 center. So he can be patient with this. He knows there's teams calling to happen right away. Of course, we talked about the linkage of Vancouver yesterday. I can understand why Dumba would be a very interesting, attractive piece they would want to look into. But as I stated yesterday, would Minnesota basically want Brock Besser, and would the Canucks do that? And I'm not convinced that they would. I mean, as I said yesterday, I really don't feel that they want to trade Besser, and the Canucks are not going to be trading a top 6 center. They're not going to move Pettersson or Horvat. That would be kind of crazy. So without them including one of those players, I just don't see how Guerin's going to get what he wants. But could he change his mind and get a sniper of a winger instead? That is possible, but I don't know. We saw the Wild make an interesting move yesterday, trading a center iceman in Eric Staal for Marcus Johansson with the Buffalo Sabres, which is kind of interesting, but odd at the same time. I mean, you take away Eric Staal, who is still what many would consider a pretty legit top 2 center, like a number 2 center, and most teams would be, a good spot. He only has a year left on his deal. He was apparently in the process of building a retirement home in Minnesota, very much blindsided by the trade, did not see it coming at all. And they traded for Johansson. Now, Johansson did play a lot of center with Buffalo last year, but for the most part of his career, he's been a winger. And I think you could argue that his time in experiment at center last year really wasn't that great. I don't think it really worked out for him. His point totals really went down. I don't know. I don't see him as a center, but Minnesota apparently does, even though his experiment as a center in Buffalo didn't really go well. Now, of course, head coach of the Wild, Dean Evason, used to work with the Capitals. He knows Johansson well from his time with that organization. And the word is that he feels that he could help as a top 6 center. And that's part of the reason why the Minnesota Wild made the acquisition. Now, of course, you can't argue that he'd be better than Staal in that regard, because Stahl's been a center all his life. But at the same time, they are getting younger. So that's a part of Bill Guerin's approach here as well, is he wants to change things up. You could argue this was a trade for the sake of making a trade, changing things up. But they get a younger player by about over 5 years. There's over a 5 to 5 and a bit year difference between Staal and Johansson. So they get a younger player. They do get a slightly higher cap hit for that as well. But we'll see, what other moves the Wild make. But the new team that's kind of been talked about more by NHL insiders being linked to the Dumba Rumours is the Winnipeg Jets. Now, of course, they're just screaming for a top right shot defenseman over there. So again, like the Canucks, it makes sense why they'd want him. But do they really have a center iceman they can give Minnesota to make that trade happen? Probably not. If you look at it, they're not going to trade Mark Scheifele. Only well-established top 6 center they have. Brian Little, his career's in jeopardy due to injury. He's likely going to spend the rest of his contract on long-term injury reserve. They could trade a potential top 6 center, like a guy like Jack Roslovic. That would probably be as close as they could get. Now, is Minnesota going to make that move for a potential? I don't know. I don't see it. And also, Winnipeg's a division rival. Sometimes teams in those regards sometimes have to overpay a little bit, or the trade just has to be too good to pass up to see them make the deal. So I honestly don't know. From Winnipeg's standpoint, it makes sense. Could they package together Jack Roslovic and their 2020 first-round pick? With their 2020 first-round pick, the Wild might be able to draft themselves a top 6 center. It might be a couple of years getting into their lineup and being effective, but they likely could grab a player who would project as that, considering where Winnipeg is picking in the draft, because it is a fairly high draft selection, considering they lost the play-in series, so they're picking high. But, that might be a possibility where they could get Roslovic in a first. I don't know that Minnesota would do that, but from the Jets' perspective, I fully understand the interest. I expect them to pursue it. I just don't know if they have what it takes to make it happen. They could even throw in a defenseman as well if Minnesota wanted to restock their blue line with a younger, cheaper option and a prospect type of thing, maybe like a Sami Niku or something to that effect, because they do have some guys that could possibly part with in that regard. But anyways, we'll see what happens with Dumba. There's no shortage of interest. Guerin can certainly be patient. But I'd say Winnipeg and Vancouver are probably the teams most interested. But I just don't know if they have what Minnesota wants. Same thing goes for the Leafs. I mean, I'm sure that there's going to be plenty of Leaf fans screaming for Dubas to call Minnesota on Matt Dumba. But are they going to want to trade William Nylander? Because Nylander could be that number 2 center or the top 6 center that Minnesota is looking for. Would you want to do that if you're a Toronto fan? They also, of course, like I said, have a glaring need. Everything else kind of fits. Dumba's not the best defensively, but he is a great offensive type of defenseman and can be very creative. And certainly there's a lot to like about his game. But like I said, if you're looking for somebody who's steadier in their own end, you're not really going to get that. But anyways, hard to say exactly. Calgary's another team that could be a fit for Dumba. They're going to be looking for some defense help. They have a lot of question marks and UFAs in their blue line, but they'd have to be looking probably for a top 6 center. You're looking at Backlund or Monahan. I'm not sure Backlund's going to get the job done. They could look to trade Monahan. I mean, that would get it done, I do believe, but I don't know if they'd want to do that. So again, this is not going to be an easy trade. If you look around the NHL and try to figure out who would have what Guerin's looking for, there's not that many teams out there that are going to trade a top 6 center. So he might have to settle for an elite scoring winger, like somebody like that. If you look at that, you get like Besser in Vancouver. You've got Laine and Ehlers in Winnipeg. You've got a guy like a Johnny Gaudreau in Calgary. Those types of players possibly could be had for the right price, including a guy like Dumba, but they're not going to get the center iceman that they're looking for unless they go about things a little bit differently. But let me know what your thoughts are on the Dumba situation down in the comments. Where do you think he goes? Give me some mock trades we can talk about further in the comments. A couple of updates on the Blues organization. The first update on Alex Pietrangelo. Apparently, contract talks are not getting any better, any closer. There apparently was another recent offer to the defenseman, but it really didn't even move the needle at all, is what Pierre LeBrun said. It wasn't much of a change. So apparently, Pietrangelo and his agents are kind of sitting back, waiting for another offer to happen, which he said should happen sometime in the next week or so. But at this point, it's fair to say that the frustration and the disappointment in their camp is going to continue to get worse. And I guess we'll see what the Blues can do. But they've already moved some players out. They could move more, try to make the salary cap space. But they don't even have to be cap compliant right away. I'm not convinced this is 100% entirely about cap space as it is about what they're willing to pay. And that's it. Because obviously the more they pay, the more they're going to have to move out. There's, obviously they value him, but maybe they don't value him as much as he feels they should. So I don't know. But anyways, Pietrangelo's situation hasn't really changed a whole lot. And frustration continues on his side. Now, Pierre LeBrun does say that if Pietrangelo were to leave St. Louis, he feels the 2 teams right at the top of his list for preference where he'd want to go would be his hometown Toronto Maple Leafs or the Vegas Golden Knights, and he also believes that they as well would have mutual interest to bring him in as well. Now, of course, both teams are really tight up against the cap. They'd have to move out a pretty significant amount of money, but he believes that they would be interested in doing that should he become available and they have the opportunity to sign him. Now, of course, we don't know exactly what they'd be willing to offer him for money, but right now, like I said, the last update we had on a contract for Pietrangelo for dollar-wise was $7.7 million. Not sure how many years. I believe it was around a 5-year deal. And then now it's believed to probably have gone up a little bit, but it's believed he's going to be looking for 8.5 to 9. So they're still quite a ways off there from bridging the gap. So I guess let me know what your thoughts are on either of those teams. But like I said, they'd have to move out significant money. I mean, we're talking for the Leafs, we're probably going to have to move out one of their big-time forwards. Probably going to have to be a Nylander, I would think. Maybe a combination of a Nylander and something else. I mean, it's difficult to say exactly. It depends on what the amount is that they end up paying them. And from the Vegas perspective, I mean, what would they have to move out? We're probably looking at Paul Stastny. I mean, that's a decent-sized contract that doesn't have a lot of time on it. So Stastny is actually a player who they probably would consider replacing anyway, and obviously somebody else maybe on their blue line. But it'd have to be probably at least 2 players on each team would have to be what would go out to make it happen. But interesting to hear that that's of the teams that he would be most interested in if he left St. Louis. So let me know your thoughts down below in the comments. Now, the Blues have announced as well that they've hired former Dallas Stars head coach Jim Montgomery as an assistant coach to Craig Berube. Obviously, this is a great story. Of course, we know back earlier this year, Montgomery was suddenly let go by the Dallas Stars. All we knew was it was something going on. We did find out later that he was battling a problem with alcohol. Apparently, I think he's at 8 or 9 months sober now. He's gone through a really good rehab program, get his life back in order, and he seems to be doing way better. And Doug Armstrong and Craig Berube, they felt he deserved another chance. Now, of course, he'd already moved to St. Louis as well, because apparently I believe his wife has family there. I know they said from a family perspective that it was just a better overall situation between him and his wife and the kids and everything. So they had already moved to St. Louis, so they're already living there. So for an opportunity to come up with the Blues is absolutely amazing and perfect for him. So nice to see, somebody get their life turned around and be given a second chance. So hopefully he makes the most of it. Sounds like everything is going well for him now, so we wish him the best on this second opportunity here with St. Louis. First time he'll be an assistant coach at the NHL level, considering he became a head coach in college, got the NHL job, and now here we are. So we'll see how he does under Craig Berube's tutelage moving forward. Now, as I mentioned, we have some more updates on the Coyotes. Now, of course, as we talked about here before in the Coyotes offseason plan video, if you didn't catch that, it was just released earlier today. I recommend you do. There's some interesting things going on with that organization, and most of them, unfortunately, are not overly positive. But as I reported in that video, it kind of touched on elsewhere, we already know that Darcy Kuemper and Oliver Ekman-Larsson are getting a lot of trade interest. The latest reports on Ekman-Larsson, we're hearing Edmonton, Calgary, and Boston are the ones they appear to have the most serious interest at this point. Of course, other teams could always jump in here, could be having conversations behind the scenes that we're not yet aware of. But those are apparently the three teams. We already kind of knew about Calgary and Edmonton, but Boston emerging, of course, kind of makes sense in a way. I mean, they have Chara, who's getting older, uncertain future. They got Torrey Krug, who they might lose in free agency. So I kind of understand why they might be making the inquiry, but at the same time, you would think if they're willing to take on an Ekman-Larsson contract with that kind of money, would they not want to try to pay Torrey Krug a similar type of money for him to stay? I mean, I know they're not exactly the same kind of defenseman, but you think maybe they would just keep Krug instead of giving up some other assets here to Arizona for Ekman-Larsson. But apparently they do have interest and are having some conversations. Now, as I mentioned as well, we also have reports from Darren Dreger indicating that pretty well any player over the age of 25 with Arizona make an offer and they're willing to consider it. They want to cut payroll by as much as $10 million or more dollars. So clearly they've got their work cut out for them. And they did finally confirm as well today that the new general manager is Bill Armstrong, former assistant GM and director of amateur scouting for the St. Louis Blues. So obviously he apparently presented a 90-page presentation and put out a 5-year plan that he mapped out when he was interviewing with Coyotes ownership, which is apparently what won them over so well compared to other candidates. So we'll see what happens with what he's going to start to do for moves. But he's going to have to hit the ground running because he's going to have his work cut out for him based on the direction here that ownership seems to be trending in. Like I said, any player over 25. So that not only includes Ekman-Larsson and Kuemper, but you're looking at guys like Derek Stepan, Phil Kessel, Alex Goligoski, Nicholas Chalmerson, Jason Demers. You name it. If they're an older player, especially ones with not a lot of term left, they're going to get a lot of interest. Ones with term will probably have a little less interest, might be more difficult to gauge their value. But, really overall, you have to wonder what's going on there in Arizona. We already talked about before concerns over their financial situation because of player bonuses that were not paid on time. We do have a little more clarity on that. And another financial issue for the team as well. Apparently what happened is players for the bonuses were asked for addresses and where to mail the bonus checks, which is unusual because they normally get direct deposit. So why all of a sudden they went to go down the check route is certainly looked upon as a clear delaying tactic, which is certainly the way I would view it. If I'm expecting a direct deposit and all of a sudden I get a call asking me where to send the check, I'm going to be like, well, why don't you just deposit it like you normally would? You can't help but wonder that it's obviously, they're buying time. So that's not a good sign. And this came up, like I said, with minor league forward Tyler Steenbergen first, who I believe was owed around $45,000. So when you're looking at the owners and what they have for assets, it's really not a lot of money. We're not talking millions of dollars in bonuses. We're talking $45,000, which for them is chump change. For people like you and I, that's a lot of dough and might have a hard time doing that in a day. But for them, that's really not a big deal, or at least it shouldn't be. So originally he was told apparently that the check was in the mail, and then he got a direct deposit 2 weeks later. So it just seems really weird. And then on top of that, now we're hearing that there's a problem with the lease payments for their arena. Now, basically what happens is Glendale technically owns the arena. It's owned by the city, but then of course it is managed by another company, which is ASM Global. So ASM Global submits payments to the city of Glendale for the use of the arena, and of course the Coyotes pay the management company, ASM Global. So apparently June 30th lease payment, which is normally happens at the end of the NHL season, it's once a year that they normally do this. The payment was not made from the Coyotes to ASM Global, so therefore it was not paid from ASM Global to the city. Apparently the management company, ASM Global, is working with the Coyotes to get the situation resolved. They're a long-time client trying to figure things out, and then the city's being patient as well. At least it appears to be on paper, but still kind of concerning. We're only talking, again, about I think it was $1.2 or $1.3 million. So for a hockey team who is paying out all that money every year, $70, $80 million, we're talking small amounts of money here that they can't seem to produce on time. That is a major red flag. That's a major concern. I've been expressing concerns over their financial well-being for several weeks. It's starting to get more attention in the mainstream media now as well from the hockey insiders. They're writing about it a little bit more frequently. So I don't know. I honestly have legit concerns about the viability long-term of this franchise. So we'll see what happens and how they can get this rectified. But Marulo has only had ownership of this team a short time. I understand we hit a pandemic not long after, but has his business model really suffered that badly that we're already in this position? I mean, are we going to end up in a situation where the league has to take over again? I just don't know, and I do have concerns about their long-term viability to remain there. I mean, I just don't know what else to say. Every time you turn around now, there's a problem financially. They're taking steps forward on the ice, but then we take major steps back if they follow through with this plan. It's just difficult to say, but I don't know. So let me know what your thoughts are on the overall Coyotes situation. Everything else discussed here today, down in the comments, and we'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content. And give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.